Hi, I'm Peggy Farren, and we are live with the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Welcome to episode 106. We're going to talk about aerial photography today, drones and things like that with John Sciarrino. But first, let me remind you, this is live. Our show, the Understand Photography Show, is live every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on our Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/understandphotography. Then Saturday, we put it on YouTube, and we also upload it as a podcast. So if you prefer to listen, you can listen to us on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever you listen to your podcasts on. And we're now uploading a new video every Tuesday. We're doing short training videos, and we've gotten a lot of good responses from them. They're about like 3 minutes long and training about different things. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications on when we have new videos. Our deadline to register for our ladies only trips, we have 2 coming up, and the deadlines are both in October. So the Cuba trip, the deadline is like in 12 days. So if you're thinking about coming to Cuba with me, February 2nd through the 9th, please give me a call. We'll talk about it if you have questions or something like that. And then our Mount Dora ladies trip is December 5th through the 12th, and again, the deadlines are both in October. And for you guys, check out Joe Fitzpatrick's trips. He's got the Everglades coming up. Or no, the Everglades is sold out. See, you need to hurry up. Everglades is sold out, but you can be put on the waiting list. But then he goes to St. Augustine in April, and the Florida Panhandle, it's called the Forgotten Coast. It's so cool. That's in May. So my guest today is John Sciarrino. Welcome.
Thank you.
With Giovanni Photography.
That's correct.
Giovanni means John?
Yes, as a matter of fact, a
a
lot of people always don't know that, and they always think I'm John Giovanni. But yes, my grandfather, who's Sicilian, his name is Giovanni, and I was named after him, but the American version. So when I started my business, my father suggested the name, and I thought it was great. And it has a certain old world sound to it.
It's a cool name, but it's Giovanni, 4 syllables as opposed to John.
That's correct. Yep, that's true. That's true. Although my, then for my website, my email, it's just geophoto, so it makes it kind of short.
Well, I did a little search for Giovanni Photography, and there's a lot of them, I hate to tell you.
They're in Naples or throughout the country?
Throughout the country.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one in Naples, though.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. All right, so now you have been doing aerial photography for a long time.
Yes,
because I remember running in, now I've known you, I mean, I
That's
barely
right.
know
Yeah,
you,
we
but I've known you for a very,
remember, yeah.
very long time. We did a wedding together.
Yes, that's right.
I don't even remember how long ago that was. It
I
had to be between,
I try to forget the weddings.
well, I know it had to be between 2001 and 2004, because that's the only time I offered video. But I know I ran into you, and you were doing aerial photography with a blimp?
A blimp.
Am I right? This is before we ever heard of drones.
Yes.
So what was that about?
Well, let me tell you, the story. I guess I should go back a little further to tell you, when I started my business, I was basically a regular studio, like everyone starts out as a portrait and wedding photographer. And then you start doing commercial jobs as they come in, and people call you and ask, and then you figure it out. Of course, I was doing some aerial photography from airplanes and helicopters when the client...
Oh, for the commercial?
Yeah, so, and they would hire and pay for the airplane, and then you would go up with them or just go up and shoot. But I was always looking at a way, how can I go ahead and get aerial photography without having to get up in an airplane? Because eventually it might crash.
Yeah, I remember I was actually in a photo shoot on the Naples Princess when they had the guy with the helicopter. This is, of course, a long time ago before drones. And we're waving at the, but I was thinking, oh my God,
some of them are really
hanging
small.
out of the helicopter. I thought, I would never do that.
Now, when you need to go real high, you still need to go in a helicopter or airplane. And the last one I went in, it's real small. It's like almost like a motorcycle kind of thing. You got the bubble, and you lean out. But anyway, so there were systems, and they still are. They're what I would call very large tripod systems, where you get this thing and you crank it up, and the camera's up there, and it sends a signal down, and you can go up 20 or 30 feet. So you get a higher perspective, but that wasn't enough. And then I started hearing about these helium-filled blimps that would send cameras up. And it turned out someone was selling a system that they bought and they didn't want to do it anymore. They only had it like 6 months. So we looked at it, and I bought it with my father. I actually bought that part of the business. I went into business with my father. And we called it Blimp Cam. And it is an 18-foot helium-filled blimp.
Okay,
And
so it's pretty big.
yeah, and you keep it inflated. Once it's inflated.
I remember seeing it in the back of your studio because I told you I used to eat at the clock all the time.
First,
and I'd see it.
First we got a van, kind of a big truck van, panel van kind of thing, and we would load it in. But then we wanted to get a bigger one. That was a 16-foot. Then we eventually got an 18-foot. So we got a trailer, and you just keep it in the trailer. And when you want to shoot, you bring it there, you take it out, you hook the camera on the bottom, and you send it up. Now, it's a tethered system, so you have a string. It's kind of like a big balloon. You just walk around. It has remote mechanism, so you can pan and tilt, and it sends a signal down so you see what the camera is seeing.
So you were really ahead of your time, man.
Yeah, that was back in 1998 that I did the Blimp Cam.
Oh, geez,
So
that was a long time ago.
So for a good 15 years, we were doing that. And then the drone technology started taking off, and it's kind of interesting the reason why. There are two major advances in technology that enabled, you say, why would drones all of a sudden started proliferating? And one is, how you cell phone, when you turn it one way and another way, it always keeps flipping.
Oh, right.
Well, there's an accelerometer in there that does that, and it's all digital and it's very small, and so they incorporated that into drones. But also the more important thing is GPS, the global positioning system. And that's why you've seen the videos where a drone will just sit there and not move at all, because it's sending signals to the satellites and everything, and it knows exactly where it is. And it's always fun, even from the beginning when I was getting involved, and then you can take that drone and pull it, and it fights to stay back, and you let go of it, and it wants to go back where it's set to go. But then, of course, you control it with your controllers. So anyway, as I started hearing more and more about the drones, I wanted to get into it. But at that time, it wasn't, you just didn't buy one and ready to fly. They were very expensive if you had one built for you. There were companies selling those, but we're talking like $15,000, $20,000 to get a whole system. And I didn't want to go that route, because then what if there's a problem with it? I don't know nothing about it. So I said, I need to go ahead and get smaller ones and start building them and building up. And I did buy a small one, and I kind of reverse engineered it and started teaching myself about it, and I started building bigger and bigger drones. And basically what you do is, I know I'm doing a lot of talking. I don't know if you want to throw out some questions.
This is exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah. Well, basically it's all different systems that you put together. You start with the frame, and you build the frame, and different companies make the frame. Then there's different companies that make the motors. You put the motors on, and even the propellers. As I got more and more advanced into it, the propellers were expensive. They were like $80 for just one pair, and the ones I was building had 6 arms, so 6 motors. So, it got expensive even just for the props.
But I imagine if you bought it, it would have been even more.
Yes, at least 5 times the cost, because you can imagine if someone's going to build it for you, the time they put into it and everything like that. So I found a company that was selling the frame, and then he would advise me on it, and it was a good partnership too, because you run into a lot of problems, because you have the motors, you have the frame, then you have the software, which is the flight control system that controls it. Okay. And it's very complicated systems, and in the early days there were a lot of problems, and of course, just like anything computerized, you had to do updates and this and that, and so it was very involved, but it was an interesting learning process.
Well, you know more about most people. Most people just buy one and
turn
it on.
I did bring this small one here to kind of show you where the industry is now, but whereas as I started building them, they were getting bigger and bigger, because I wanted to lift bigger and bigger cameras.
Well, you wanted a big DSLR instead of the little GoPro.
Exactly, and I got to that point because I was doing mostly video at this time. Of course, I was doing stills, but I started seeing a market to get into filmmaking, because there is a certain amount of filmmaking that happens, in Southwest Florida. And the last large one that I built, and actually we usually call them UAVs.
Oh, sorry.
But
what does UAV stand for?
Oh, see, I knew I was going to draw a blank on something.
Heather told me earlier too.
Unmanned aerial vehicle.
Unmanned aerial vehicle.
Yep, and
Okay.
there are other designations too, but and then we always wanted to keep saying that and not like get into drone, because drones have a militaristic sound to it, because
like
the Army and the Air Force has drones, but you can't get away from it, and it's stuck. So they are drones. We tried to, but anyway, I have one hanging in my garage, and I have one hanging in my living room. But the biggest one is about 4 feet from span from one arm to the other.
Wow.
So it's huge. And it is powerful enough to not only lift a DSLR, but it can lift movie cameras that they use in Hollywood and stuff like that.
Okay.
So the reason I started and because I was building them myself, it was expensive, but not as expensive if I was to buy a ready-to-fly one. But then I did a lot of work, and you were going to ask earlier about what kind of clients I had, and most of the clients I was doing stuff for were resorts and hotels.
Oh, so they wanted like the video of you flying over like the fancy resort to show how they're right on the beach, and they got this cool pool.
I did one in Daytona Beach. They're all on my website still. I can't remember.
I watched one from Costa Rica.
Actually, that was the highlight of my drone career. I was actually doing some aerial shots in a neighborhood, and as I was landing it, a guy walked up to me from his driveway with a coffee cup in his hand. He goes, "Yeah, I was out." Well, he was tea. He goes, "I was out drinking my tea, and I saw this drone, and I followed it, and we were talking about what I was doing." He goes, "Well, I might need you. I have a nature reserve in Costa Rica.
Wow.
And I'd love to do a promotional video of that." So we continued talking, and eventually he flew me and my crew out there. Now there is a crew. Well, I call it a crew. It's a cameraman. See, when you're doing these larger high-end drones, it's a two-person thing. You have one person who's the pilot that flies the drone and concentrates on that so you don't hit anything. And then you have a pilot who has a separate video feed that he sees what the camera's seeing. And so he pans and tilts down and controls the camera.
Oh, so one person to fly, one person to control the camera. Right.
And then you're supposed to, and your crew, have a third person, which is usually the client, that keeps an eye on the drone. This is getting into the FAA regulations and everything.
Oh, I see.
There are a lot of regulations, but one is that you always flying line of sight. You don't want to send it somewhere where you can't see it for safety reasons. Plus you have to have the 2 people if you're doing video, and plus you have to have a third person watching it. So there's all these different...
That's interesting, because Joe and I actually, we have, are you familiar with Orange Jeep tours in Ave Maria?
No.
Well, they have this Jeep tour where they take you out into the, Collier family owns all that property out there, and so it's a nature Jeep. It's really fun. You should go.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, they were doing a commercial, and they wanted us to come out there with our big cameras, and show that it was good for photographers, because you'll see all kinds of wildlife out there. It's really cool. Anyway, so we were out there, and they had he probably had a big drone like you do. I mean, they did. They had these people. I was so surprised.
The big ones
they had
are
DSLR.
black, and they kind of look like insects.
Yeah.
Because
it was.
And the one I had was a hexacopter, but there are octocopters, so there's 8 arms.
I don't remember how many they had.
Was it?
And was it with a 5D Mark III mounted on it?
There you go.
It had a big, It had
well,
a
I
big
got as far
DSLR.
as shooting 4K with the Panasonic. And like I said, I don't really do it that much anymore. I'm trying to remember, what was the 4K that Panasonic came out with?
Nah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but
Anyway.
yeah. So anyway,
So you were mostly doing resorts to start.
Yeah, and then some baseball stadiums. One of my associates, he's a sports photographer, so he's involved with all the stadiums up in Fort Myers. And he got us a job to photograph all the stadiums. And it was really cool, too, because we would fly it around as the players were playing, and there'd be plays that we were capturing and double plays and stuff. And, you know, it's really fun and exciting to shoot this stuff, because as you capture great footage, they go, "Oh, did you see that?" And you can't wait to see it and watch it on the computer. But the downside is, though, that you're flying thousands of dollars worth of equipment in this, you know, apparatus, that things can go wrong, and they have gone wrong. And everybody who's gotten into this has lost drones, and
Have you lost an entire drone?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like how?
Oh, they just
Smash?
just
Crash?
fly away and
Or they
crash into
fly
the
away?
water.
Oh my gosh!
You've had them go into lakes, and or they just crash into a tree, and you never know why. Now, some of it is pilot error. As a matter of fact, most of the drones that crash are pilot error. But as you get into it more, you start to learn how to avoid those things. But you'll be doing everything right, and all of a sudden you'll be flying, and all of a sudden you have no control.
Computer glitch
and it
or
just
something.
it just starts flying away and going this and like that, and you're going, what's going on?
Oh my gosh!
You're wondering whether there's, you know, somebody with a jammer or something that's.
Well, I flew my first. Joe has a drone, so I flew the first time. I don't know, 2 weeks ago maybe, and the screen was going out.
Oh yeah.
So we couldn't see what was going on. So it was kind of. So who
It's
knows what happened? There's a
disconcerting,
loose wire or
And
something.
that's another thing too in the earlier drones that I built. It's like I said, every system is separate. So, you know, then you had to have a camera that would broadcast down what the camera's seeing. And in the beginning, it wasn't coming straight from the camera. You would have a separate camera on the front of the drone and something else that would follow. So it was, and if you had problems with that signal coming down to you and you can't see where you pointed, then you can't shoot anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there would always be problems like that. So it was always, you know, something you had to deal with.
So what other kind of people, what customer type of people would, or even,
Well,
even if you did it for a hobby, what would you use? You know, aerial photography, what would you do with it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I really don't do it that much commercially anymore for several reasons. One is that there's so many people doing it now.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, the regulations are very, very strict, and nobody's following the regulations. And I said, well, why am I going to jump through hoops and whatever? So now I'm mainly doing it just for fun, and when I go on vacation
So what do you
with family.
do for fun?
Well, I was hiking in Denver with my niece, and we just did a bunch of stuff where it flew over, and we would just, you know, capture and record, just like if you take selfies and stuff, you take selfies from the air. But you asked the question, what other industries can use drones? There are several which are very interesting, and I was looking into it at that certain point before I decided not to go into it anymore and not invest anymore. But agriculture is very big with drones. Farmers have all kinds of issues and problems with the health of their crops. And there are certain spectrums of photography that will capture various things, diseases and different insects that are. So you would fly that drone up and take these photographs. I forgot the exact technical thing, but you can analyze it, and the farmers would analyze it and know what they need to do, whether they need to water a little bit more here or use a certain chemical there. Other industries are inspection for buildings, sides of buildings, bridges. Whereas they used to have the guys go out there and, you know, climb and click on and do that kind of stuff and take. Now you can fly a drone and take very detailed photographs to inspect bridges and to see where there needs to be repairs and stuff.
That's awesome.
And it gives you an idea of, when you think along those lines, there's so many applications for it. And of course, law enforcement, rescue, firefighting. As a matter of fact, firefighters have had a big problem with people flying drones when there's a fire. They want to go ahead and send their drone up to take pictures of the fire, and will, be a problem with the firefighters. So they always ask people don't do it, but they are using it a lot now. Now they can send a drone to inspect where the fire's going, how big it is, and stuff like that, and not risk sending an airplane, which, even though it's fairly safe, but they can, sometimes run into problems with smoke and stuff. And so why jeopardize a pilot when you can send a drone?
That is, I never see. The only thing I know people use it for is real estate.
Yeah, and that's the most
about all I know
prevalent,
people doing.
yeah.
And then I know some hobbyists who, one guy, I watch him on Facebook, and he does so many illegal things. I think, I can't believe he puts this on Facebook, because he's flying them all over in the National Refuge and all this stuff where I know it's not legal. It's fun to look at.
Yeah, and national parks, they've already designated you can't fly drones. And I remember reading a story about the guy who was flying his drone at, oh God, where is that one where they have the,
Here, down here?
No, out west.
Oh.
Well, anyway, he was flying it, and it went into one of the pools. The geysers, where the geysers are.
Yellowstone.
Yes, Yellowstone,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And there's a certain area where there's these pools and stuff, and the sulfur's coming up, and you wait for and it crashed into the thing. So he went up to the guys and said, "Listen, I lost my drone." And they go, "Well, you just broke the law." And he wanted them to help him go get it out of there. Yeah, so that was kind of funny.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
People are something else.
I mean, the main rules and regulations about flying drones is not interfering with air traffic.
Yeah.
And so anybody who's going to fly a drone, you're not allowed to fly it over 400 feet. And now the ready-to-fly ones that you can buy, like this one, they will not go above that elevation.
Stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, of course, people probably know how to hack into it and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But the earlier ones that we're building, there were no
restrictions.
and you can go as high as you want. And as a matter of fact, there's plenty of videos out there where people are testing the limits of how high they can go.
Oh boy.
And that's funny, though, when people ask questions, that's one of the first questions people ask is, how high can this go? And
Oh,
that
really?
Kind of stuff. And I go, well, it's until the radio signal can't reach anymore, which is a few miles, or if you boost that signal, I guess, until the air's so thin it can't help itself up, or your batteries run out too.
Oh, yeah.
And then now you can go miles away. It's amazing the technology they have.
Really? You can go
Yeah.
miles away, but I
Sure,
thought you
yeah.
had to have line of sight.
You do, but there are, and this has been around for a long time too, is that you can do waypoints, basically, because remember that it's also communicating with satellites. So you can program a drone to do something and not control it. So basically you go and in the software you say, take off, go up to a certain elevation, then go over here to this point on a map, and then stay there for a little while, and then go to the next point, and then keep going, and then come back. And you can have it go 5 miles away. And basically, once you start it, it's like a program. It goes. You're not controlling it anymore, and you can just watch the video feed coming back. But it will do that because it's programmed to do it, and it's coordinating it through the GPS.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Now, what is a UAV forecast?
I know it's funny. You looked that you came up with that term and whatever.
It was Heather. Heather does the
Oh, okay.
Heather does the questions. I have to admit, she comes up with all the good stuff.
Well, it has to do with making sure the weather is you can fly with the weather. Plus,
I mean, is it some specific forecast other than the weather?
Well, there are it's multi. There are websites and there are apps on your phone
I
that kind of plan everything out and to make sure that where you're going to fly is not near an airport.
Okay.
Because that's another restriction. I was telling you about the height restriction.
Yeah.
So that's what you need to do. So if a client calls you and says you want to, as a matter of fact, there was a developer developing the corner there of Davis Boulevard and 41.
That fell through, didn't it?
It did, and he contacted me. He says, "Yeah, I want you to go up and record what the heights are and everything, and take pictures because I want to prove to him that the building I want to build there is not going to be too high." And when I looked where he was saying, I'm going, "That's like 500 feet from the airport.
Well,
I
the
go,
airport was fighting it.
Right, exactly. And he came to me and I said,
Said
for that
18
very
stories
reason.
is too high.
Well, I told him I can't even fly there. Even if I tried to get
It's too
special
close.
permission, it was too close. Yeah.
Because
See,
that's right here, you know, that's like
right,
2
exactly.
blocks from
Yeah,
here.
exactly. So you can't fly from certain distances from the airport,
Okay.
and if you need to do it, you can go ahead and apply for a special permit to do it, an exemption, and you know, but then it takes weeks to approve that and stuff.
Yeah, one of my customers had a big thing on the Naples Princess, and he wanted to get a drone, and he couldn't. He said it's going to take too long to get the permit.
Right, right.
So-
And that's another reason why I don't do it anymore.
The pain- too
Because
too many
let's back up
regulations.
a little bit and let me tell you about that. You know, when before this was being used for commercial use, it was basically hobbyists that were flying these. And to this day, if you're flying as a hobbyist, you don't really have these major restrictions that they put on people who are flying commercially, which always seemed strange to me. So, you know, you can have some 16-year-old kid who built his own drone. He can go ahead and fly it anywhere he wants, as long as he doesn't fly near airports and he doesn't go over 400 feet. But if you're going to go ahead and do it commercially, then you have to get special licenses and that kind of stuff.
That doesn't make any sense.
And the two major, the earlier one, which I have, is the 333 exemption, and you had to apply for it. And even when I got that, you still had to have a pilot on with you, an actual, you know, airplane pilot. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
He had. It's called a pilot in charge, and so it's not that he had to fly it. And I have an associate, and
Who
he's
has a
on my
pilot's
website.
license?
Yeah, and
Okay.
and so when we were doing jobs together, you know, he would come along with me. But it was, you know, that's
Then
a
you
lot
got
of
to
things.
pay an extra person.
Exactly. Yes.
And the customer doesn't
And
like to pay
I
extra.
was saying, you know, 90% of the people were not doing that. Then there's a 107 rule, which is similar to that, but it still requires either that you can go ahead and get take a test, and you're getting kind of a pilot's license, but not
Oh yeah,
a
I
true
read about that in the
pilot's license.
PPA.
So it was designed specifically for UAV pilots and stuff.
Okay.
So I never went that route because I started getting out to it once they got to that point.
Now let's go back to how everything works. So are there like better times of day, or
Well,
you
yeah.
know, I mean, obviously lighting is lighting.
Lighting
so
is
we want to
key.
be.
So the same rules that apply for photography. So when I was talking with clients, I asked them, you know, which direction would we be shooting? So if it was, say, a condo building on the Gulf, and we wanted to show the Gulf behind it, then we wanted to do morning shots because we
Okay.
wanted that sun behind us, and we wanted that deep blue water.
Yeah.
You know, if we did midday, your watercolor is going to change differently, and you're going to have shadow patterns and stuff like that.
But it doesn't matter as far as flying it.
No,
Time of
no.
day.
There
What
are
about-
sun flares that can affect. And remember how I was saying that sometimes I'd be flying and then wonder why did this happen? Why did it start acting crazy?
Yeah.
And it could be solar flares, and that affects the radio signals. So, and there again are apps on your phone and stuff that you can go ahead and check for solar flares and make sure that there's not any happening.
Wow, I never would have
Yeah,
thought of that.
yeah, exactly. And then wind is an issue, of course.
So if it's too windy, you just don't do it.
In the early days, it would be a lot more struggle, but they're getting better and better. And this is all down to the flight control systems that I was telling you about. And the flight control system is collecting data and seeing how it's fighting, and if the wind pushes it, it's going to struggle harder to stay where it is. So if it got fairly windy, or if you heard gusts of winds, you would hear the drone go, and it would rev up to fight to stay where it is.
Wow.
Now, of course, as we all know as photographers, you know, shutter speed is important, and of course this thing's flying around, it's not on a tripod, so you want a fairly fast shutter speed. But as they got more and more complicated, the gimbal that the camera sits on is constantly correcting and stabilizing it. So for video, when you did that flying, it was nice and smooth. Some of my earlier videos weren't that great because, you know,
Yeah, 'cause of the-
stabilization wasn't as good, but then they got better and better, and now the ones they sell now are incredible. And even with the wind, you can't even see
You
it.
can't tell. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Now, do you shoot video and pull the stills out, or how does that work?
No, you can switch from one mode to the other.
And how do you?
In the earlier days, I was just using regular cameras that I was putting on the bottom of the drone, so I had to set it.
Like a point and shoot.
Yeah, yeah.
Or no, regular.
Rangefinder, like a
Okay.
Sony. What was it? The 7R. I'm trying to remember what it was, but they were fairly nice 24 megapixel cameras, but you'd have to land it and switch over to video, and you can start it and stop it, but you had to change the mode down on the ground.
Okay.
Now everything can be done in the air.
So
and
is
you
it,
can even
is it just like you just have a controller that says switch to manual mode?
Yeah, you go to your settings and you just, yeah. Well, now they have the controllers, actually. You just hit one button, then the other, and it switches over.
Now, do you, so if you're, let's say you're shooting stills, are you shooting in an automatic mode though, like
I shoot.
aperture priority or something, or shutter priority, or?
I am, and you can also, and I shoot on RAW too. A lot of these are
And
able to
so-
shoot RAW, so you have that
So
latitude
you
too.
determine the shutter speed and then let the ISO and
You
the
can
aperture.
you can
the camera?
control on this one here. I can go ahead and go to manual if I don't think the automatic is working good, and
can you see the picture well enough to know
Yeah.
what you're? Do you have
Yeah.
a meter and everything?
and that's
where
why
you
it's
can-
important to shoot RAW, because it gives you that
A little leeway.
Yeah, little leeway. But you can pretty much tell, yeah. And it's
But is there a meter that you can see too? That meters
there
to
is,
zero,
but the
or?
thing is, you don't want to start getting into all the little details because you want to concentrate on flying the drone too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you can, and I can go ahead and go to manual and adjust it and stuff like that, and change my shutter speed. You can change your aperture.
But you have to look at it. It's not like holding a camera where you don't
No,
have to look
no,
at the
but there's
settings.
like
You
little
have to look at
sliders.
it.
Yeah, you go and you take the aperture and you can
So
change
that makes
it.
sense that you'd rather be looking at the drone.
I'd rather just set it. Automatic works fine. Yeah, and so most
Okay.
of the stuff when I was doing with these, the automatic.
How do you know when to take a picture on a still picture, though? I
Because
mean,
you are
is it-
seeing.
Are you seeing it that
seeing it
well?
live,
Is it
sure,
really
yeah.
at that?
Mhm.
So you can get your composition and you can stop that thing in midair pretty much?
Yeah, it's pretty steady. Yeah, like I was telling you before, it's like once you stop it in one spot, it's communicating with the satellites and it's staying in one spot. Now the wind might hit it a little bit and it will let go, but for the most part, it's pretty steady.
How do you get it? Can you get it to that specific spot though? I mean,
Oh yeah.
you know, like, oh, I need to go in 1 inch over, or do you leave the drone
Well-
and then you turn the camera, right? You have the drone, somebody flying the drone, or maybe you, and then
Well,
you
the
also
earlier
have the
ones, you would
camera.
actually turn the drone to pan, you know, and then, but then there would be a tilt up and down. Well, think about what we were shooting. If it's basically real estate and stuff, you know, it's not that exact. You can show that house and show there's a lake behind it, or if it's on the golf course, so you just compose that shot that there's enough room and you can crop in slightly because the
Okay.
resolution was high enough. So it's not like you're doing really fine tuning and getting them real tight.
Like you can't ever crop it or anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. What's the difference between like shooting video and stills from the air?
Well, of course, you know how you have movement when you have video, and that's where it's important to have the two-person setup,
Okay.
because I was always the pilot, and we would talk about how we're going to do this shot. So say we're going to go and fly past the outside bar at a resort, and there's people there having drinks. And then we're going to swing around and go over by the hot tub, and the spa, and then go up high and then show the whole hotel.
Okay.
So that would be the flight path, and we'd
So
talk
do you
about
walk it out first usually, or?
we just kind of talk about it, and we just do it, and then we'd learn from that first run and then do it again.
Oh.
So I would start flying, and like I described, I would do that, go past the people at the bar, then the drone would go, and I'm concentrating on flying and doing the flight path I just described to you. Now, my cameraman as the drone is going this direction, he might be panning the camera this way to capture what he thinks is interesting. So he becomes now the photographer, and I'm more the pilot.
Oh my God.
I used a photographer, so he was always really good.
Yeah.
And he is the one who came to Costa Rica with me.
Oh, okay.
So it's a little bit more complicated if you're doing video. And
Because
then, of
you
course,
can't, well, remember I did wedding videos. And you know, it'd be so frustrating because somebody would walk in front of you.
mm-hmm.
Where with a still picture, you just don't take the picture when somebody's walking
Right,
in front of you,
right.
you know? It's like no big deal.
And that's the thing, too, is when you're shooting video, you're capturing a lot of video.
You're doing
and then,
30 frames
right.
per second, so there's no time for problems
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, and there's a lot for them to choose, you know, because usually these productions, you're going to end up with a 4 or 5 minute
Yeah,
video,
sure.
and then, but you might have hours of raw footage to choose from. So you just do a lot of takes, just like in the movie industry.
Now, let's say that you were flying by the bar and people are sitting there drinking. Are you down at their level?
Sometimes we'll get down
Now,
pretty
are
close,
they,
yeah.
Are they models or actors so that they know not to go, whoa, look at that drone?
Every job was a little different, you know. Most of the time it was employees of the resort
Okay.
playing guests. Sometimes they would ask guests, and that was up to them, and to get model releases and stuff like that.
Oh my
And of
God.
course, safety is always a thing. We're always conscious of safety, so you wouldn't fly real close, and you wouldn't like come like over them real. So, you know, you're maybe 10 or 15 feet away and not directly overhead. So if something did go wrong, you know, you don't want these dangerous props chopping people up.
And would they chop you up if they ran into like
Yeah,
the 4-foot
they
one? I
wouldn't.
guess that might hurt you
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
But the little ones, would they hurt you?
Not really. Yeah, they could, but you get lacerations, but nothing major. But those bigger ones, yeah, they can
could-
kill a person. And there are instances where people were killed.
Wow.
There was a sport, I don't remember the name of it, but they were helicopters, and they were remote controlled, but they were gasoline operated, and people would fly these. But they were like traditional helicopters. They weren't the multi-copters that everybody sees. This was just like one big prop and then the tail. But these people would do these acrobatic flying, and I heard about a father and son were at some park doing it, and the son was flying his, and he was doing loop-to-loops, and he came and he actually chopped the top of his head off.
Oh my
He basically
God.
killed himself, yeah.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
sad.
but that's very rare, and those were very powerful and
But
very.
most of these little drones that everybody has.
And now
they're
they
not
like
so
you
bad.
see where they hover and with the GPS. They were controlling it, you know,
Yeah,
with no
and-
GPS assist.
Wow. Now, can you fly these things like, I'm just thinking about
Indoors?
video, like, can you fly them indoors?
You can, but you
That
don't.
wasn't my question, but that's kind of a
Oh,
cool
okay.
question.
Yeah, and you fly them through doorways and things
That's
like that.
what my question was.
I
Can
never
you
really
fly them through things?
I saw a lot of video where people would do that, but when I was building these things, you know, these large ones that I were building, I had on the small of the larger one, I had about $6,000 invested. And on the larger one, I had about $10,000 invested, and depending on what camera I had on it. So you don't want to take chances and fly through small areas and then chance losing it and getting damaged. So I never really did much of that. Actually, there's ways around it. You would actually fly up to that point and then stop, and then you would just take
the handheld.
the handheld gimbal, and then you
Yeah.
would dissolve
Oh, yeah.
from that
That's
image
brilliant.
to the next,
That's
and then
much
just walk
better.
through. Yeah,
Much safer.
yeah. Because these gimbals, these stabilizing gimbals that are on the drone, a lot of them have dual purpose. You can take them off the drone and put them on handles, and then you
You can
work
just
your
walk.
camera just like a video person would do inside, and just stabilization. There's a lot of fun things that can be done. I remember watching one video where they had it come up to someone's window and then went through the window, then went around. But what they were doing is they were handing off from one person to another that you didn't see it because the camera was pointing that way. That person would lean in and hand it to him, and that person would take it and then walk through the room and then give it to someone else. So, and Yeah, it was neat. You'll watch the production, the final video, and it's really cool. And you go, how did they do that? And then they have like how
Like
we
the
did
behind
it.
the scenes.
Exactly.
I love behind
And
the
you see
scenes
the
stuff.
people, crouching behind something and grab it and stuff. So it's kind of fun.
That's so cool. Well, let me just tell you my experience with the Joe's drone. He's like, you want to fly this? I'm like, yeah. So I do it, and we were out, that old Port of the Islands where there's a radio control aircraft. Do you know where I'm talking about? Way out in the Everglades?
There's several of them around
Well,
in
anyway,
Naples where
we
you
were
can go to fly
out
these
there.
things.
And I was like, okay, zoom up, zoom down. Okay, this is boring.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I thought about it.
So you started dive bombing other flyers?
Well, maybe I needed to learn more what to do
Oh,
or
so it
something,
wasn't exciting
but
for you.
It seemed kind of boring to me, but I don't know.
Well, there are competitions and people who fly these things through obstacle courses.
Well, that might be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. And it's called first-person view, which is kind of like what we were doing, but we would have a screen. But the first-person view, people who fly those things have goggles. And so when they're flying it, you'll see them with these goggles on, and they're seeing what the craft is seeing. So they
Oh,
would
so it's
direct.
like, what do you call that? Virtual
First,
reality?
it's a form of virtual
But
reality,
basically
but specific
it's
to
like they're
drones. It's
on
called
the-
first-person view.
And it's
Because
like they're on
it's
the
like
drone.
you are the camera. So yeah.
That's so
I never got
cool.
into that
I wonder
because
how
there's
much
a
that
dangerous
costs.
part of that. Oh, that's not that expensive. A few $100s to probably a few $1,000s, depending on what kind you would get. But once you're doing that, you're not able to see the drone. You're seeing what the drone's seeing, and so that's dangerous too. So, and it was when I was doing it commercially, I always wanted to be able to see the drone, and my pilot would always want us to be aware of stuff too. So we never got into the goggles. Yeah.
Wow, I never even heard of that. That is so cool.
But there's, I always had fun watching all the videos on YouTube of people getting into trouble with drones. The funniest one I saw was guy's flying, obviously at a zoo, and he's flying around this tree, and there's these monkeys in this tree, and they're looking at the drone. You're seeing the video of the monkeys looking, and one monkey takes a stick, and he's going like that. And all of a sudden, the drone falls
he hit it.
down. Yes, and you see it tumbling. So you're seeing video of the drone falling, and the next thing you know, the monkey's on the ground picking the drone up. So you're seeing this video of the monkey moving the drone around. It's hilarious.
Oh my God, I love that.
I have to send you the link of that.
That is so funny. If we can, send me the link. We'll put it in the show notes. I love behind-the-scenes stuff, especially like that. Well, that must have been.
And a lot of the cameras are waterproof, but the drones aren't. So they'll crash and sink. And there's some where, it's sitting down there on the bottom of the ocean, and these fish are swimming by and stuff, but the
my
video's still going. And I had some mishaps too. I had one crash in a tree, and the video's still going. So when we reviewed the footage later, you basically see the drone. It's looking down. It's in the tree. So you see me walk up with my hands on my hip, and I'm looking, and I go, there it is. Then you see me walk away. You see me come with a ladder, and I'm putting the ladder up, and then some other people come by, and you see me talking to them, and then you see me climbing up the ladder, and then reaching for the drone and pull it down.
Oh my God, I love that.
It's hilarious, yeah.
Jeez. Now, if somebody wanted to get into drone photography as a hobby, what would your advice be? Like, how would they start? Is there a specific, like this drone that you brought here, which we have audio, so I don't want to talk too much about it.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, it's heavier than I thought it would be. That is nice and small. And some of them have a camera with them and some of them don't? Is that how it works?
All of them, most of them have cameras now, and
They come right with a camera.
they come with a camera, and the most important piece of that camera is the gimbal that it's hanging on, and it's stabilized. So basically, as the drone's moving around and tilting and stuff, that gimbal is keeping the camera level, and it's mostly for video, but also you want your shots to be level if you're taking still pictures. So that's where the technology has really advanced a lot. When I was building the early ones, there were people developing software on their own, and these are just like these boards, these electronic boards, which you had to actually, you know, install and program and stuff. It was very complicated to get these systems working. But now they're, you know, you don't have to worry about it. I would suggest if people wanted to get into it, local clubs and stuff, because you'd be a little nervous. I think people who just buy them and follow the directions and watch the tutorial videos, they do fine in their backyard.
They're not that hard to do.
No, because like I said, you take off and it's just, you know, you let go of the control and put it down, that drone's just going to hover there. But as soon as you hit the forward or left or right or rotate, it's going to move where you want it to go.
Okay.
So,
Are there any better brands than others, or do you know?
Well, DJI is the most popular, and
That's
they
what Joe
basically
has.
make it. Now, when I was flying and building my own drones, different components, the motors, and the flight control systems that I was using were DJI.
Okay.
So they also were selling ready-to-fly drones at that time, but like I said, they were very expensive. Or you can buy their flight control system and install it on your drone. So I'm very familiar with DJI going all the way back to those times. And then, you know, even when I would get one flight control system, they would come out with the latest one. So then I would uninstall that one and put the new one on, and you had the latest and greatest. And then eventually they started making the drones cheaper and more efficient, and it was more cost effective to buy a ready-to-fly one.
When's the last time you built one?
About 3 years ago, three and a half years ago.
That's not that long ago, really. Do you
It's
like
kind of a
doing it?
shame because there's, you know, I put so much into it. I haven't sold them, and the thing is, there's not that much of a market locally for it. It would have to be someone who wanted to get into filmmaking because it is so advanced. It is such a high payload that it can lift up. But with these larger and more complicated drones, the skill level is much higher, and to know all the different systems. And if one little thing goes wrong, you need to go ahead and troubleshoot that and find what the problem is.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't even bother even trying to sell them. But they're kind of like a neat thing for when people come over to my house and see that thing hanging there.
Hanging from your ceiling.
Exactly. It's in my kind of lanai area, but it's kind of fun. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is. And then you know what's really fun too is, you know, these motors are getting bigger and bigger. There's all kinds of people who are trying to build personal flying craft. I even thought about it. Because some of the motors, you know, are like 4 or 5 inches in diameter and very powerful, and you get 8 of these. You can go ahead and build the thing where you can hang on to the bottom of it, and it will lift you up, yeah. And but of course, you know, there's always going to be complications and problems, so you don't want to really chance that.
I can't remember the name of his company, but it's in Lake Wales, Florida.
Okay.
And he had some kind of personal, it's like a big helicopter thing that you strap to your back. I forgot what it was called, but you...
Parasailing.
I don't think that was...
Well, some of them involve,
Maybe,
it's a
it might
motor
have
with a
been.
prop on your back.
Yeah.
But then you also had, kind of like where you can parasail without it. You can jump off the side of a cliff
Right, no, he
and then
didn't have a
parasail
sail.
down. Or if you have this motor, you start running with it, and the motor takes you, and you actually will take off.
Yeah, that's what they do. They have some kind of, you could go
There's
do it in
also
Lake Wales.
they're kind of like big kites too that you can do. So it was probably something like that, and I knew some people who did that. I would never do it. This is too dangerous.
Me too, I'm chicken.
That's the reason why I got into all this stuff, so I don't have to go up in airplanes that much anymore.
Oh, I've never done that. I just remember that I told you at the Naples Princess watching the guy hanging out of that helicopter thinking, that guy is crazy. I met him later too, Roger Desolitz or something. Did you know him?
No, I don't know. Okay.
Anyway, crazy. So what's the difference between, okay, so we went out behind Port of the Island, the old Port of the Islands, and they have a whole field that somebody must have donated or something for radio control club, radio control
An
flyer
interesting
clubs.
fact too, you know, radio-controlled aircraft have been around going way
Forever.
back to like the 20s.
So what's the difference? Or are they all flying drones now?
Well,
the only
back
reason I know they
then-
were there is I was like, look at that! Look right here, we were here to fly a drone, and there we were, and nobody was there though.
Well, the big change happened, like I said, with the with GPS, the global
so
positioning
is it the same
system.
thing now? The drones.
Well,
are the
there's still
same thing?
people who build model aircraft, and they're building scale models of actual aircraft, but scaled down, and that's what has always been around. And they had little engines and stuff, but when they were flying, they had no GPS assistance, they had no software to help. They were basically, through radio controls, they were controlling the controls on the airplane, just like if a pilot was on that airplane. So everything was basically the same as a real aircraft, just scaled down. I mean, there's an interesting movie called Flight of the Phoenix with James Stewart. Did you ever see that movie? Well, they crash in the desert somewhere, and they're going to die. And one of the guys, he's a German guy, goes, well, you know, I'm an engineer and I design aircraft. We can go ahead and take apart this part of the plane, and we can move that, and we can build it and take off. And the way that he's talking, they're going, wow, that's great. He knows what he's doing. So halfway through the film, they asked, so what firm were you with? He goes, oh, here's a brochure of the company I work for, and he hands the brochure to him. And they go, wait a second, these are model airplanes. He goes, yes. He goes, this is one that I specifically was involved with. And they go, you mean we're building, you build toy airplanes? And he's like offended. They're not toys, they're really aircraft. All the aerodynamics involved with smaller ones apply to large aircraft. Very interesting movie. So anyway, I always
had to see that. I love James Stewart.
Flight of the Phoenix, I think it's called.
Oh my gosh. So how much does a drone cost nowadays? They start pretty cheap now. In fact, you know what? I found some app called Wish where everything's from China. It's very, very cheap. And they were selling drones that were like, they looked like they would fit in your hand.
Yeah.
What the heck are those?
Well, and they've been around for a long time, all kinds of the really cheap drones, and I bought a few just for the fun, but they don't fly very well, and I guess if you practice 5 hours a day every day, you can start getting better at it. But to get something with a good flight control system and GPS, you're talking at the lower end, $500, but these are just for your own fun. When I go on vacation and stuff, I have actually a smaller one. This is made from the same company. It's called the Spark. You know the Spark?
What company is this?
DJI.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
But then you go up to get middle of the road. You're about $1,500 to $2,000. Then DJI makes another one that's about $3,000, and then the higher end one you're getting again up into $8,000, $9,000, $10,000.
Wow.
There are other companies, and I can't remember because I've been out of it for a while now.
Yeah.
But there's a company, FreeFly. I think it's FreeFly, that makes very high-end drones for the filmmakers and stuff like that. And they're, you know, like $15,000.
Yeah, well.
And then there's even more specialized. Then you're getting into $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 for, you know, the big industries. So it's a whole gamut.
What about if somebody's into like I shouldn't say just, but into real estate photography?
Well, a lot of realtors are doing that now and getting their own drones.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Another reason why I got out of it, because, you know, not only did you get a lot of people buying them, and all of a sudden they're becoming a business in their own, doing real estate photography. The realtors were doing it. Just like the law enforcement and firefighters. There were all these different municipalities are buying their own drones.
Now, the camera quality, though. Now, this DJI company, they make the cameras, or do they put somebody else's cameras in there?
I'm sure they partner with different things for their
'Cause they
earlier
weren't
ones,
they
but
with
now,
GoPro in
but
the
the latest
beginning?
one of this model, they partnered with Hasselblad. So Hasselblad did
Wow.
build the camera that's on this latest Mavic Pro 2.
Mavic Pro 2 is what this little one on the table
Yeah, this
is,
one's
in
the
case
Mavic.
You can't see it if you're
This one's the Mavic Pro,
Mavic Pro.
and the Mavic Pro 2 has a Hasselblad
So the
on it.
quality of these pictures is pretty amazing.
It's
What about
it
the
suffices.
lenses? And-
Yeah, they're getting better and better. Not as
and
good
it's
as.
all wide lenses?
Remember with the earlier ones that I was building, I was actually lifting regular cameras, so the optics and the processing and the resolution of those cameras were much better. So, they're getting higher and higher megapixels, but as all photographers know, it's not just the megapixels.
Yeah, the lenses. and-
It's the lenses and also the color gamut and that kind of stuff and how it processes the images and that. So when you do want to manipulate those images, the better, more information you have, the better you'll
Right.
do. So they're not going to do as well like that, but for most clients, it's
gonna
enough
be-
for them.
Yeah, it's going to be enough.
And of course, it's all about, if you're shooting and you're exposing correctly and you're shooting on days where you have good light and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Of course,
yeah.
you're going to shoot at dusk. You're going to, I'm sure the, ISO boosting's not going to do well. It's going to be very noisy on these little ones, but, that's
So that is,
that's one of the
commercial
limitations.
people should probably have a better,
Yeah.
the bigger, better.
If you want to go ahead and do dusk shots, and you're going to boost that ISO, then you want to probably have one of the more expensive drones and having a DSLR on there, which will do better with the.
Because I would imagine a lot of the real estate people want sunset pictures, right?
Yeah, or what we call dust shots, but the dust shots I do from the ground, you're on a tripod and they're long exposures, so you
Okay.
can't do that. So
Yeah.
there's always a trade-off on that. So they're not really built for doing that kind of stuff.
Right. Not yet.
Although not yet. although the stabilization and the GPS, sometimes I'll look at video of it sitting there when I'm not moving at all, and it looks like it's on a tripod.
Wow.
And I'm way up there in the air, and I go, wow, that's amazing how well they got this. So,
It's
but even
getting
you
there.
know how it is too. You have a little bit of vibration if you're using a slow shutter speed, you're going to get blur.
Yeah, that's for sure. So what's coming up for you?
Well, mainly I'm an architectural photographer now. I mean, part of the reason why I got into the drone stuff is because a lot of my clients could use my services.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I explained earlier, that because there's so many people doing it and because the regulations are getting stricter and stricter, I'm not really doing the drone work anymore. But my clients are developers and builders, architects and interior designers, and I'm
Okay.
doing a lot of interior photography. You'll see my work published in magazines,
Oh, I've seen your work. It's amazing.
yeah,
I-
both
I remember-
regional and I've had some national stuff.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
Yeah,
you were
you've
an
seen a lot of my
amazing
work in
photographer.
Home and Design magazine, and Florida Design magazine is in the area now. And then Naples Illustrated does features on homes, and I've been in a bunch of their features for that. So architectural photography
Yeah.
is mainly what I do.
I worked at, I don't remember what it was, but you had your, like, they would look like wedding albums, but they
Mm-hmm.
were all full of homes or architectural
Oh,
type of.
I was at one of the home shows.
Maybe
Is
I
that what
worked-
it was?
Maybe, I don't remember. It's been a
Yeah,
long time.
the
but I
magazine
remember-
would host a home show, and so there'd be various people.
It was really
that-
impressive work.
Yeah, thank you.
Very, very nice.
Yeah.
And your website is?
giophoto.com.
So just look for geophoto.com.
Geophoto.com.
You don't have to learn how to spell Giovanni.
Yeah, so, yeah.
But if you do search for Giovanni, make sure you say Naples, Florida, right?
That's true, because there are a lot of Giovannis out there. They
learned.
all love the name, it has that
It is
artistic.
it is a cool name.
Yeah. And I still have a lot of my videos on my website of stuff that I've done, and the Costa Rica video, like you
Yeah, I
said,
watched
and you can see the baseball stuff that I did, which is kind of fun, and the resorts, various resorts that I videotaped and did stuff for throughout Florida. You can see them there too.
Yeah, okay. So geophoto.com. We are going to put that, John's website, in the show notes, as well as a lot of the other things we talked about. So that's going to be on understandphotography.com. And don't forget to check our trips while you're on our website at understandphotography.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice to
Thank
see you
you.
after so many years.
Yeah, same here. And thank you for having me do this.
I'm Peggy Farren. Thanks for watching the Understand Photography Show. Join us next week for episode 107, and we're going to talk to Bernie Hines about creative compositing. Thank you for watching the Understand Photography Show. It would help us immensely if you would click like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.